Good morning and welcome to day 2 of our Feed the Soul Summit. My name is Miriam Glaze and I'm the founder of Athlete Soul. And if you don't know about our organization, we are a nonprofit organization founded and run by former athletes. Our mission is to support athletes as they transition away from sport, raise awareness about the challenges of athletic retirement, and encourage athletes to develop beyond sport. You can find more information about the organization on athletesoul.org. Now, this morning, day 2 of the summit, we're going to be talking about career preparation and identity in athletic retirement in 2 sessions. So the first one is about career preparation. We'll have 3 different panel discussions this morning. Before we get started with these, I wanted to remind you that the event is recorded. We will be sharing the recording with our participant, as well as on our website and social media channels. And unfortunately, we're not going to be taking questions throughout the morning because the discussions are so short, but you will be able to submit your question in a survey after the event for an online discussion forum. So stay tuned for that. Now I'm going to pass it on to Tanya Nolan, who is going to be moderating the panel this morning, and we'll be talking with all of the panelists about alumni network and how we can utilize those in support of the transition away from sport. So on to you, Tanya.
Awesome. Thank you, Miriam. Hello, everybody. So excited to be here this morning. As Miriam mentioned, we're going to be talking this morning about using alumni networks to support student athletes and their transition from sports, and how we can really dig into that and support both as coaches and as administrators. A little about me. As Miriam mentioned, my name's Tanya Nolan. I was a 2-sport Division I athlete at the University of Pennsylvania. I was both a swimmer and a rower, and am very passionate about Athlete Soul's mission around supporting athletes through the retirement process. And so I'm very excited this morning. I feel like there's so much opportunity in this area, and we have a group of amazing panelists for you. So what we'll do is I'll hand it off to each panelist to do a quick introduction of themselves, and then we will hop into the discussion. So Steve, why don't we start with you?
Great. Well, thank you, Tanya. So my name is Steve Davis. I am the current Associate Vice President of Engagement with the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. I also am a former Gopher football player, played here, was a captain here, and now am trying to reconnect the dots and connect alumni across the world to resources that are available through the university.
I love that. Reconnect the dots. Huge. Shelley, how about you?
Yes, my name is Shelley Lyle, and I currently work for the University of Florida Sport Management Department. I was a Gator myself. I played soccer here. I went on to play semi-pro and do various roles in athlete development and coaching. And I'm currently an adjunct lecturer and career engagement and outreach coordinator, which really means career coach. So I am also passionate about working with student athletes as well as students, and trying to help other future coaches in their way of development to help athletes be holistically supported.
Amazing. I love that. So John, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Tanya. I'm John Moffett, and I'm a 2-time Olympic swimmer. I was on the 1980 team that was boycotted, and then the 1984 team. I swam at Stanford University, and I transitioned from Stanford into a career in entertainment. Specifically, I became a television producer, and I was a longtime television producer, and I've transitioned once again more into the world of Olympic sports. And I have a podcast called Sports Life Balance that I just launched last year about life-enhancing lessons from sports. And so I'm able to talk about just being nimble on your feet. I did a non-traditional kind of transition from college into entertainment, and kind of what it takes to go out there and get your job. So I'm happy to talk about that, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you, John. And Robert, handing it over to you for a quick introduction. And I'm not sure if you can hear us. So it looks like he cannot. So, oh, there we go.
Are you talking with me, Tanya?
Yes. So I know you were having some audio difficulties. Basically, we've just gone around to each person for a quick introduction, and then we'll start the discussion. So if you could give a quick introduction, and then we'll go ahead and start the discussion. And I feel like there is a bit of a delay here. So hopefully that will, can you hear us now, Robert? Okay. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a delay, so hopefully we will get Robert's introduction momentarily, but I've gotten the opportunity to speak with Robert before, and he's done some amazing alumni work in his alumni association, as well as was a football player at Brown University. So, and I'm sure he can do it much more justice than I just did, but also an amazing doctor as well. So with that, let's go ahead and start the discussion, and hopefully Robert's audio will figure itself out. So first, we'd like to really start about, the importance of including alumni to support the transition away from sports. So Steve, I'd love to hand it over to you to talk a little bit more about that and about the importance of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think, from the standpoint of transition, who knows better about the plight of the athlete to everyday society than the former athletes themselves? I think it is instrumental in including alumni to help connect and also provide the learning lessons that alumni have gone through for the students or the athletes currently, so that they know when the sport ends, because the sport does eventually end, how to rectify with that, how to transition, but also because the alumni have been through it, they also can provide the tips and what not to do, so they don't have to go through the struggle that we have all gone through ourselves. So it's like we're trying to pay it forward. We're a huge, valuable resource, I think, as alumni, to provide the guidance and how to navigate not only your sport, but how to navigate the next portion of your life and your identity after you're done with your sport. So.
Sorry about that, little muting issues, but anyway, so that's awesome. I really want to hear more. And, Shelley, I feel like you've had some really interesting experiences here as well. I'm curious about, your thoughts on what Steve said and the importance of alumni support and how we can actually support as alumni.
Sure. Yeah, I have a really unique experience because I played for my coach. I've also worked for her, and she's was here, just retired at 26 years. And so alumni for me has been very integrated into my experience as a student athlete and as an alumni. So I think from a coaching perspective, and that we might have another question about this later, but how core it is to have a coach that really pours in and creates an atmosphere where alumni are welcomed back and encouraged to be connected to current students. Because I agree, I think, we can help students in their journey after, in transition out of sport. I can't say it's always easy to make them not have to walk the hard road, but I think it's having people alongside you in the process that really can be encouraging and allow them to just ask questions and things like that. And I know for me, that's been a huge part. My coach has always been kind of the database hub for us, but really connected the first generation, first team at Florida to the middle to the current until she's now stepped away. So yes, I would say that's where alumni for me has been fundamental, and jobs as well as relationships.
That's so cool, and I'd actually love to hear more about it. You're right, we do have a question later on, but I think obviously it naturally kind of goes into that. How can coaches, what did your coach do specifically that was very supportive to kind of encourage that alumni connection?
I think, once we graduated specifically, like there was that time of you're no longer the coach, you're now a friend too. And because she was younger when she started, she built those relationships really well right after graduation. I mean, it was building into the players while they're playing for her, but then also continuing that relationship after. So, I mean, every year we have alumni events, and that's to integrate current players, former players. It's football, it's at a game, it's a very and everyone loves to see each other. And I think that's where you're inclusive, you build a alumni culture almost within the team. And so I think that's where, and she's always reachable. Like players could go back and they had a good experience. I think from my other friends who haven't had the same coaching experience, I think it's really hard for them to want to go back and to want to stay connected. But because, she created a great environment throughout her time, it makes us all want to be a part of the alumni.
Yeah, that's such a great point. So Robert, it looks like you are back with us. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm back.
Awesome.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
At a meeting here in Nashville, running through some technical difficulties.
Gotcha. No worries. So we were talking about basically, the importance of alumni support in athletes' transition away from sports and how alumni can support athletes through transition. I do know from our previous conversation, you've had interesting experiences within that. So would love to hear a little bit more about your experience with that.
Yeah, so I know we went through some introductions and it was a little broken up when I was first on here. But
yes, so please also do an introduction. You can do it much better than what I did.
My name is Robert Parisian, and I'm an orthopedic sports medicine surgeon at Mount Sinai in New York City. Throughout my years in orthopedics, I've been a team physician for Boston University Athletics as well as Penn Athletics, and now I'm a team physician for US Ski and Snowboard. And Mount Sinai represents the US Open. So we have a lot of experience in that regard. And then, before all this, I was on the other side of things and I played football at Brown University. And a lot of my experience, comes from that environment with regards to this conversation right now. So when I was at Brown, as we had discussed previously, we had a mentorship program. What did that mean? That meant that you had one alum that was assigned to each individual player. And that was good because we had nothing like that prior to my time there. And again, this is 20 years ago. And so during that time, it was helpful. You had that alum to go to, but you're basically relying on their personal network. And it was very helpful. If you want to go into finance, they happen to be in finance. You want to go into medicine, they happen to be in medicine. But it was difficult outside of that environment. And so what did we do? Well, my buddies and I graduated, we sort of took it to the next level. And we created a summit, I guess you would call it, where we come back one weekend out of the year and we bring back maybe 60 or so former football players, all different generations. And we have an entire summit there. And the football team all comes and takes part in this. It's a coach-driven environment. So the coach says, you have to be at this for these 2 days, because we have a number of alums come back, and then we break up into different sessions. One is a consulting session, one is a finance session, one's a medical session, and the athletes are welcome to come and go as they please. And then in these sessions, you have people that have been in the industries for say 30 years, and then others that have been in the industry for 3 years, and so they can describe that and help the athlete along that path. And so now we're really tapping into those larger networks, and the athletes are getting a more focused, sort of mentorship during that model. It's been pretty successful. And so since at least there, the basketball team has adopted this model. But the head coach is actually a buddy of mine from college, and then the wrestling team actually adopted this model. And so I've partaken in all of those. So.
I love that. It's so interesting. And so, John, I'd actually love to hear your thoughts on this as well. As you mentioned, you kind of took a more non-traditional path. And so would love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Well, yeah, I appreciate, first of all, the perspective of the people within the alumni networks, and that's something that I'm not going to be able to speak about as much. But as a user, I will tell you, graduating from college, I did utilize the lists that were given to me of alumni who were in the entertainment business, and I did call them. And I made some meaningful connections, some lasting, meaningful connections of that. But I also, there was one person in particular, a man named Roger Corman, who is a legendary filmmaker. And I called him and I caught him at a time when he was just leaving the house and he said, call me tomorrow. And I didn't call him. And I regret that. I regret that to this day because he is a kingmaker within the entertainment business. And I met him later and I told him this story. And he was like, that's too bad. I really would have liked to help you. So I guess my cautionary tale is that follow up. It's not easy to cold call or cold email somebody. But Miss Valerie Kondos Field, who is the legendary gymnastics coach from UCLA, she talks about the art of the ask. And she tells a story about how she was intimidated, but she wanted to meet John Wooden. She wanted to go to have John Wooden over for dinner, and she was terribly intimidated. And her husband just said, just call him. And she called him, and to her surprise, he said, well, I'd love to. And there is immense power in that. And there is immense power in just forcing yourself to take that step and introduce yourself to somebody. And I've been on the receiving end of that. And I can tell you that when one of the athletes that are currently in college call me, I'm more than happy to help out because I know how hard it is for them. And I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, when somebody is on a list and you call them, they will be receptive and they will be willing to help you out.
Can I just,
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
please.
I just wanted to echo the importance of that because I think it can be very challenging in different aspects for these athletes, you know, if you're a current athlete, especially collegiate, or even later on, if you're at the professional Olympic level, to be calling up and cold calling people, sort of saying, hey, I would just like to meet you. I'd just like to discuss. I have an interest in what you're doing. And I think it's really as basic as that. In our field, you know, we have a huge hierarchy, right? You have medical students, pre-medical students, residents, fellows, attendings, and it's very challenging. And I usually tell them, and especially when they go to meetings, and say, go up and introduce yourself to this person, tell them that you know me and that you're it. And that's all you need. And if you're going cold calling, either emailing or calling, sure, I don't know what it is. Maybe 10% of the time you're going to get somebody who responds, but so be it. That 10% may be very valuable. And I would argue it's even more valuable because that person that responded to you, they appreciate what you've done and they want to engage and they want to help you. And so I think that 10% is a very valuable 10% that you get in response. So I completely echo John's sentiments there.
Yeah, Robert. And don't get discouraged if you get a lot of ghosting. To this day, I still get a lot of ghosting from people that I know. You know, but you just have to ask. You just have to ask. You have to be brave. You have to also use your instincts when to stop pushing. Oftentimes, no reply means no. But you just keep going and keep finding people and resources and keep asking. My first job that I received, that I got right out of college, I was surfing with a former coach of mine, one of my high school coaches. And he was asking me what I was doing. I told him I was looking for a job in entertainment. He said, well, my nephew works in films. Let me give him a call. The next week I was on the set of a major movie. So you just never know. You just have to knock on the doors and sometimes they open up and you can walk through.
The phrase that I like to utilize is polite persistence, right? So polite persistence. You don't want to be that person nagging. Of course, nobody does. However, you do want to be persistent because let's face it, some people are busy. They've seen it. They want to get back. They had the best of intentions, but they didn't. So for me, it's just been polite persistence, and that should pay off.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in. Sorry, Tyann.
Yeah, no, please.
Take over the platform. No, what we're talking about here really is the power of the connection. And the fact is, you know, former athletes have passion for helping other former athletes or other athletes, so much so that even during a busy time in their schedule, they're willing to sacrifice that just to help the next person. Like if that person reaches out, like, oh, I played at the University of Minnesota, could you help me, with some job opportunities, absolutely, I would give them my time to do that. But I also want to step back in regards to the coaching atmosphere. I think we all can't be too naive to think that it is the coach's responsibility to activate a lot of the alumni engagement. The coaches are hired to win games, to work on the current student athletes. It's not in their contract to do alumni engagement. However, it will behoove them not to include alumni in the fold of what they're doing to really enhance the culture of the program, to enhance the family atmosphere. If you look at it in its entirety, programs that do this well are always successful because they have people coming back. They have people helping to bring people to that team to help keep them going and keep them consistent. And this is where I feel like, because there is a passion from alumni, that there's going to be a mechanism where alumni is going to be involved. I think it really needs to sit on its own outside of just the coaching, and that there needs to be a support mechanism that supports the coach whenever they're doing some of these alumni engagement, whether that's, a letter winners club, or, former athletes are creating a group themselves that can support the coaches, because the coaches are so busy with the game plans and making sure the current athletes are in alignment with all of their philosophies and strategies and things that they're doing, that sometimes that part gets lost. And if they're able to really tap into it in the right way and support it in the right way, like it's a win for everybody.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, and a little bit of what you alluded to in terms of also this type of support of the coaches, or, like you said, Letterman's Club or whatnot, really generating excitement about the program, which, as an athlete, when you go in, if you're excited about it, and, you become winners, and that also supports the coach. So Shelley, it sounds like, you kind of had a very unique situation where your coach was really helping spearhead this alumni connection. Are you aware of any other programs that do it like that, or what other types of programs are there?
Yeah, I do. I recognize that a lot of coaches don't stay in one program for 26 years. So I know that's definitely a huge part of that. I would say we also have an F club. So everyone gets an F club membership after they graduate. There's football, every football game, there's an F club you can go into. And so there is that alumni connection. I think there's connection with the Hall of Fame events and other things, but yeah, I don't have another set program. I would say from a university side, we do have a platform, kind of like a LinkedIn, but it's created by Graduate. And so athletes and regular students can go on and be alumni in our program and be able to connect that way and be willing to help once they're alumni. They can offer their guidance to students. And we've seen really good connections in that platform. And something I've actually considered going and talking to our athletic department about, because I think it could be a great way to just have one hub for them that would be very interactive and realistic to people's lifestyles right now. So
yeah, that's so cool and very interesting. And thinking about kind of these social aspects of connected alumni, I think, we've sort of alluded to interactions between alumni of different sports. John, you spoke a lot about kind of, hey, this social connection actually helped you. And I think we see that more and more in jobs when recruiters are getting 8,000 applications, and it's like you have to know someone. So John, I'd love to hear kind of a little bit more about that social aspect, and even through the Olympic Association and how that is, also an alumni association, if you will, and how that can also support.
Yeah, in my introduction, I neglected to say that I am president of Southern California Olympians and Paralympians Association, which is basically the alumni for Olympians and Paralympians in Southern California. I'm also recently, I was elected into a VP position into the national level, so the USOPA, which is the National Alumni Association. And if you're a Team USA athlete, there are definitely some resources, and more of those resources are coming online. The USOPC is becoming much more sensitive to the needs of retiring athletes, and they're actually putting resources toward that. One thing specifically that I have actually taken advantage of is it's the USOPC ACE, Athletes Career and Education. And they provide a lot of resources. In fact, I was able to go to the Tuck School of Business that I was connected via the USOPC and their connection. And so I was able to get an executive business certificate through that. Another perfect example is that Miriam and I actually met at an organization, a networking organization called Athletes Touch. And Athletes Touch is basically retired athletes who are all networking in order to help progress their careers and to find new careers, etc. So these things do work. I will fall back a little bit too on the social thing, is that I am not always the best social networker, and I have to really give myself a pep talk oftentimes before I go into these big networking events. Even an event that I hold might throw for the Southern California Olympians. So if you're like me and sometimes you're a little bit anxious about that, you just have to dive in, because it pays off in ways that you can't imagine that'll pay off. But if you don't do it, it won't pay off. So you just have to venture out there and put yourself out there.
Yeah, I'd like to second that as well. I mean, it's like anything else. We have some people that would say that they're extroverted, others say that they're not, more socially inclined versus others. But I completely agree with that, John. It's sort of what we tell, again, like our medicine residents presenting at these meetings, just do it. You just have to, jump in, do it. And then the next second one gets a bit easier. The third one gets a bit easier and you figure it out. But, the networking and putting yourself out there in those environments is extraordinarily important. I would say even the pre-networking, I'd pull it back a second, try to understand the environment that you're going into, do a bit of homework, do your research, figure out who is the best you can, who's going to be there, who's going to be in that room, who's going to be in that environment. And as I said, if you can tie upon one small, connection that you have with them, you went to the same undergrad, you're from the same state, there's all of these little things that will trigger, a conversation, a relationship, and make you a bit memorable to that person that you engaged with. And so I said, I would even do the pre-network a little bit, do some of that research, some of that homework, and then when you go out there, again, just jump in and make sure that you do want to talk to the people that you intended to speak to. And then on the back end, follow up is extraordinarily important. So make sure that you're following up with these people. And I even go back to the old school way of letter writing. I think that even writing a letter is really going to be the only one doing will stand up. But at bare minimum, send the email to thank them in a more formal way other than a text, nice to meet you.
I love this. And this is really kind of also alluding to the things you guys had pointed out before, just reaching out, to former athletes. And so, Steve, I'd actually be curious to hear from you and your work with the Alumni Network around kind of the social aspects of connection, as well as, what do former athletes also gain from this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, in my line of work, we do social networking all the time. So trying to really hyper extend the opportunities for folks to connect, either regionally, virtually, and really kind of build those connections across the board. What's really unique is that when you're playing a sport, you're very, boxed into the people that you're around every day, your teammates, your coaches, so much so that sometimes you don't get as exposed to the other sports. But when you graduate or when you're done with your sport, every athlete is available to help and wants to connect. And we try to work with the athletic department and really fostering those opportunities for all alumni to meet, hear stories about their journeys, on their team, their journeys in life, and really kind of help solidify some of those things. What I think is really valuable about alumni connecting, not only with the current students, but also connecting with each other, is I think the piece that's really important is the identity piece. And I know there's going to be a session that talks a little bit more about that. But what really is a difficult journey, as we all know, when our sport is completed, is trying to figure out, who am I next? Outside of just the career and trying to find a job, because that's everybody searching for a job to connect and wanting to, further their career in that aspect. But also it's like, what are your hobbies now? Like, how do I, go out here and meet other people? What do I want to contribute to the world? Like all those things that, at a certain point when you were an athlete, everything was handed to you and you were on a pedestal and everything just kind of fit in alignment where you didn't have to really think outside the box. Whereas now you have to, and it's very helpful to get, advice and hear from others' journeys in regards to what they've gone through, what they're doing, how they were able to find themselves, how they were able to rectify with losing that piece of themselves and creating a new identity for themselves moving forward. I think from an alumni standpoint, there's value in connecting with others just in that piece alone. But also when you think about, like I mentioned, the power of connections, that is true in every aspect of life. You trying to find how to buy a home, you move to a certain area, you're trying to get acclimated to the city, you work in a new company, but you didn't know anybody, but you find out somebody, played a sport and you can easily connect with that person. Really trying to find those connections to help enhance your life, and learning along the way is part of it. So I think just having the opportunity to create those connections, create the opportunities for folks to learn from each other in their journeys, is very, very vital. And I think it's especially helpful for former athletes, as I mentioned, because of the aspect of being so used to one aspect of your life going the same way every day. And then now you have to transition to do something different where you weren't trained to, like, all right, well, like a normal student, go get an internship and learn these different skills, or, go buy a home and rent and taxes, like all these things that you didn't really think about. Like now those things are apparent, and it's helpful to kind of learn from others' journeys to really prepare you for those things and those steps.
None of us are appropriately prepared for taxes, Steve.
A good accountant. It's what we all need. I think that's such a great point, Steve, and so interesting, just thinking about the interaction there and really kind of casting a wider net. I think that really leads us to another question of how we can encourage more interactions and collaborations between alumni of different sports, to kind of help with that identity piece. I personally find that it doesn't matter the sport, I connect with athletes, and I think most athletes feel the same way. So how can we really encourage that as, mentors?
I can
Shelley,
start a little
I will
bit
hand
on
it
this
off to
one.
you. Yeah, great.
I would say, I think it's going back to, a lot of coaches change, but there can be, at least again, Florida has a longevity of academic advisors, academic services, alumni services that have stayed, even ADs. And so I think it's they do a lot of different mixers with different events and things like that, and getting to know other athletes even while students are in their role as student athletes. And so I think it's networking while you're even in university, and then also learning how to use those resources and branch out while you're there as well. So one thing I do agree, I think athletes kind of stay in their bubble in general, because they relate well to each other, but I don't want to underestimate the value of they are also in departments at universities, and there are other resources and other people they can connect with and build their network that will also help them in transition and help them in their future. And so I think when I think of athletes from various sports after and the transition, they're helpful doing it together, but also, like you said, another interest. So maybe no one on your team was interested in engineering, but a football player was in engineering, and literally you might have been the only two athletes that graduated that year in engineering. And how can you build that that just connection together. And because that's a whole other industry now they're stepping out of an athlete into a totally separate role. And so I think those are other places that are really important to stay connected with people who are in the same industry as well as you're moving on.
Yeah, I think one way that I've seen it done, at least, is just immediately after graduating. I mean, first of all, let me step back. I mean, clearly, I think your networking environment, just your life in general, is so much more enriched if you're going across your different athletic groups. You're networking with not just football, but you're also expanding out field hockey and lacrosse and soccer and basketball and so on. But also if you come from an alumni setting and you're coming out of collegiate athletics and you go to whatever city or state you go to, there are some fairly robust alumni societies. And so I'd say that might be one way to get involved. I mean, I was on the board of directors of the Brown Club of Boston, for example, and that was a great way to meet athletes, not only of different sports, but also of different generations. And so that was a very great, that was a great way to get involved. And I know a lot of these, if it's not your city, if you don't go to a major city, there's a lot of states that have that as well. So maybe getting involved with some of your local alumni networks could be a good way to approach, to do that once you graduate.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make too. I think, there are a lot of networks and opportunities for you to just kind of get associated with. Like, even if you think about Athlete Soul and creating this summit with all of these different athletes and, people from different generations kind of sharing opportunities for folks to learn, but also there's opportunities for folks to network with each other. And I think just plugging in and putting yourself out there to kind of learn from others, there are a lot of groups that are available to do that.
And as Stephen was saying earlier, when you're trying to figure out and create, I guess, you said that new identity, or you're trying to figure out what you're going to do later on in life, through that transition, it's certainly helpful to be talking with people that are doing it, because you don't really fully understand and appreciate any role for that matter unless you're actually in that environment. So certainly it helps not only to talk to those people, but then if you can create some scenarios where you're going and shadowing and spending time with these people. I mean, I say it to pre-medical students, undergraduates, medical students all the time. If you think you're interested in coming into orthopedics or sports medicine in particular, come hang out in the office, come to the operating room. Really immerse yourself in that environment and see if it's something for you or not. And so, and again, that goes back to John too. It's a whole combination of these things, is the ask, right? You need to ask that person, can I come and do this with you? But I think those are very important. If you can't physically do it, at least have the conversations and say, what is it that recreates this environment for you? Meaning, how did this recreate your athletic experiences? You missed a locker room, fine. How is this something that you're engaging with in a way that makes you sort of recreate that as best as possible? Although we can never do it completely. But I think having those conversations are important.
And Robert, I love that you, basically support these athletes in terms of inviting them into that world. And I think it brings up the larger question, and one that we can close with, around how can we, as alumni, as mentors, really support athletes through this transition? We talked about always kind of answering the call and whatnot. Are there any other kind of more proactive ways that we can engage as well? John, I'll start with you.
Yeah, as far as being proactive, I look back upon my athletic career, and there was, I would consider it a bit of disservice in that there was a myth that abounded while we were in college that, oh, you're going to be in great demand because you are a great athlete and you're working hard in school. And you just have to put that aside, because I found that to be largely a myth. People do appreciate it out in the real world, that you're hardworking, that you're dedicated, and potential employers do take that into consideration. But that's not going to necessarily open up the doors on their own. And you have to really get out there. And especially in entertainment, you have to be clever. I've had actually current athletes at Stanford call me and say, I'm interested in working in television like you, what should I do? And I said, you need to go to any number of televised events on campus and find the production crew and introduce yourself to the production crew. Because as Robert was saying, that people tend to be, if you're putting yourself out there, people tend to be receptive of that, and people respect that. It shows ambition and it shows drive. So try to think out of the box perhaps a little bit, and look around you and what resources potentially are out there that are not tapped yet, and just try it out.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say that's perfect. Just real quick. That's perfect in the sense that my father used to always say, you know, if you want to be a writer, don't go out there and tell people you want to be a writer. Show up with a manuscript. So get that process started. And so I think that's important, you know, so that you're a self-starter. You know, don't show up and say, oh, I want to be an academic, you know, a clinician, but yet I haven't done any research. So that's where those conversations are important, where you reach out to someone above that's gone through it and sort of say, hey, this is what I'm interested in doing. How can I best get started doing this? And then, you know, start doing it.
Well, this is great. We are at time, and so I'd like to really thank all of these amazing panelists for this discussion and your input. It sounds like, you know, there's some amazing opportunities now around alumni association, around coaching, and some opportunities for alumni associations to really support coaching and this process throughout its life cycle. So thank you, everybody, and I will hand it back over to Miriam.